Hello and welcome to The Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. Today we're joined by Chris Shaffer, Senior Director of Procurement, Facilities and Biomedical Support at EyeCare Partners. And today Chris and myself will be discussing the road to procurement transformation at a rapidly growing company. What were you tasked with on joining EyeCare Partners? What was there kind of a particular challenge that was sort of ready for you when you stepped into the role, aside from a global pandemic?
So a little bit about EyeCare Partners. Grow predominantly through acquisition. So it's a consolidation model, bringing together private practices or mid, even large size, other private equity backed sort of consolidated models. And if you go back in time about 2 years ago, it was basically a collection of groups. I think our CEO, he described it sometimes as like a stamp collection, so it was just kind of like we had all these logos, but there really wasn't anything kind of bringing that model together. It was just, look how many practices we have. There was like a top line revenue number, and that was fine. But really coming in, there was a PE transaction in February of 2020. We were brought on by Partners Group, which is a really interesting organization, and they're very heavy on investment, and then very near and dear to my heart, with coming from Unilever, they have a very, very impactful and robust sustainability platform too.
Okay.
So what they, kind of the whole notion there was, let's just stop being that stamp collection. Let's really bring these groups together, really leverage what we can do, all in the name of patient care. We look at it and say with so many optometry, sort of primary care, units in our organizations, and then we have ophthalmology clinics and even advanced specialty and subspecialty care all the way through surgery centers in our network. So, we really started to say, why can't we make a bigger difference in the lives of our patients and really harness that vertically integrated model? And to do that, we have to do certain things to mature as an organization. So that was part of what I was brought in to do from a procurement standpoint, was to really look at how are we leveraging our vendor relationships? How are we leveraging our scale across the board? How are we looking at, value-based equations for the organization?
So talk me through a little bit of the journey, if you like, in terms of adopting Cooper. What led you to Cooper in the first place?
Wanted to, have an understanding of what was going on with our spend, what were our vendor relationships. I know coming into the role, normally you would ask a question, what is our annual spend across the board? Like, what is our spend under management? Who are, major vendors? What's our spend with them? What are our contracts? Knew none of that coming in. There had zero insight to any of that. So certainly that was one clear, business problem to solve. In addition, then also with our accounts payable, looking at how do they continue to scale as we grow in our organization. How do they scale their processes to leverage that? So that was I think at a very high level, the impetus behind the platform. And I'll say, I think something we can talk through here, but we've had, when you look at it in aggregate, where we are today versus where we were a year ago is night and day. So we now have a lot of a lot more insights, a lot more control over what's going on in the business. We can make more informed decisions. But I will say we have still a long way to go, especially on our accounts payable side. We're doing a major revamp. It's an amazing story, and I think there's a lot of good that's happened, and you have to focus on that aspect of it. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges when you're growing like this, and you're trying to implement systems and processes along the way. So, that's where I say, I think, Coupa has been a strong tool for us. There's a lot that we can harness from it. We view that there's probably a lot that we're not even taking advantage of. And I think that's the really exciting and encouraging thing is, we haven't tapped into the full potential yet. And we have this growing and diverse network. It all just leads to a lot of excitement. We had the good decision making there to bring in a group like Aquis to help support. Honestly, that implementation cycle was I think it was really interesting. So just as Aquis was kind of learning us, we were kind of learning ourselves through that process too. There were a lot of things that came to light. Do you have standard, SOPs and policies and so forth, structure around your programs? We had really none of that. And so, the implementation certainly was all about kind of getting Coupa up and running, but at the same time, it was building all of the support around the platform so that we could, be off and running as an organization. Even in the just over a year, I guess we're coming at almost a year and a half of being live with Coupa, our organization has changed immensely. When I think upon go live with Coupa, I think we had something like 6 surgery centers in our network, and today we have nearly 30. Wow. So, that in itself, those surgery centers are very, very complex organizations. And so to go, 5X on that growth from that standpoint, we've had to make a lot of adaptations and bring in new suppliers, new capabilities. And again, that's just all been an evolution of the process for us.
What was it like, for example, onboarding your suppliers into your network, because that can sometimes be a challenge, can't it?
And that's the interesting one. So again, I mentioned, coming in, you have certain questions that you ask that you expect there's fairly standard answers for, who are some of our biggest vendor partners, who are strategic vendor partners. Well, I remember distinctly coming in and asking about like our medical surgical supply, which you can imagine that's a large portion of what we do. That's something like, as it stands now, I think we're pushing $20 million a year in terms of just spend on medical surgical supply. And coming in, there was kind of this notion, there's a particular vendor that is definitely our preferred. That's our strategic vendor. That's who we do the most with. Well, almost immediately upon coming into Coupa, we realized most of our groups were saying, well, no, like we need this distributor brought into the platform. And so that immediately, to your point, led to this work stream of folding in now more of these distributor relationships, building catalogs and those things with them. In some cases, there was an understanding already of what Coupa or a system like Coupa is. In other cases, this was new. So we were really building this from the ground up, especially in that space. I was very encouraged. We had a lot of vendor partners that really put their weight behind the implementation and were really early adapters to get in there. So that med-surg side of it really took off. That was kind of the first category of spend that really took off in Coupa for us. And what was so interesting in that is what we found is that the vendor that all along was our preferred and strategic partner, their spend was dwarfed by 2 or 3 of these other distributors. And so these were just some of the insights. And we said, well, geez, what are we doing? We're, not to say we stopped focusing on this other partner, but wow, we've got some really untapped opportunity there. In fact, with the one distributor, then we looked at and we were able to negotiate a contract through last year with them and really get some really solid, pricing concessions and rebates coming out of that. Those are conversations that would have never happened had we not had our spend sort of managed in a platform that we could get some insights. We would have never had those types of insights coming.
Because I guess, the way a lot of people describe it within the industry is a kind of like a community kind of powered intelligence, isn't it? Because it's coming from so many directions.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think that that's really something that's been interesting. We've even had some of our vendor partners come forward and say, we didn't realize how powerful this tool could be. We also didn't realize how many of our clients and so forth were already engaged in that platform. And so we've seen several vendors that have really adapted this whole notion. They've really put their weight behind the punch-out catalogs and some of those kind of enablers that they said, this is I always kind of say Coupa acts as a bit of a Salesforce multiplier for these partners. So there is a community of clients for them, even within our organization. When we sort of onboard you within Coupa and you really adapt and put a strong catalog and some things together there, look, you have now access to a network of almost 700, locations across a diverse network that, I don't know what you would have to do from a Salesforce standpoint to have that reach, but in a lot of cases, they're getting reach and they're seeing an uptick in revenue on their end. They're seeing where there's a lot of value coming from our network alone, and then saying, well, let's seek other relationships like this and build that community. So I think that community focus has really enabled things. And I'll be honest, then even within our organization, just this whole notion of a community of organizations and procurement professionals within Coupa. We recently attended the Inspire conference, and I was really pleased to bring one of our younger procurement leaders with me, and she was just making connections and getting better understanding of the platform. And it was just such an eye-opening experience for myself and certainly for her. And so I do think that there's just such strength in this community to understand best practice and how are you leveraging different capabilities within Coupa, but then also broader structure around how are you managing your vendor population and what can you do to help them better understand and realize the potential within Coupa and sort of these types of platforms. So,
and since you adopted Coupa, have you seen a change in the way that procurement is being viewed within EyeCare Partners?
Through the last quarter of 2021, we experienced significant growth. We brought on some very large organizations over, and it was and still is, we're still making sure that we have all of that sort of integration happening in the right way. For me, that was a real learning. That was the biggest stress test I think that we've put on Coupa to date, to see, do we have, and I wouldn't just say Coupa, I would say all of our supporting business functions, we're all stress test to how can you adapt to bring in these new organizations, very large organizations, in some cases very mature organizations, into our our processes, our spend profiles, all those things. And so we've really had a lot of learning through that. It's come through a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of opportunity that we've explored there. But coming through it now, we're really seeing the importance of certain profiles of vendors and certain categories of spend that maybe weren't at the forefront previous that are now, and we're paying much more attention and bringing these vendor sets into Coupa, onboarding catalogs, really embedding that, and I think a really strong testament to that. I was just in Florida last week with a new surgery center and group of practices that we acquired. And, going in, it was a really nice conversation. They were saying, well, here's kind of our vendor set. Here's what we order. Here's what's really impactful to run our operation. And we were kind of able to say, great, they're in Coupa here, and here's how you access this. Really easy, streamlined ordering for you. Oh, we have that service contract for you. We were just kind of, clicking through it in a way that I I almost was, beside myself a little bit, just thinking how far we've come to where we're now able to share that with a new group. And now I think the trick is we have to go back and make sure that a lot of our other practices kind of have, all that access and all that support. So there's a little bit of a cleanup yet to go there. But I feel that we're in a much stronger position now as we start to bring in new acquisitions that, especially Coupa, is an enabling tool that we can hand to them pretty quick. I mean, a lot of these groups, certainly there are larger organizations that we bring in, and, through that, we learn as much from them as they're learning from us, and we adapt and that.
Have you also seen a benefit in terms of, cloud automation as well?
I would view that as we get into kind of our next phases of how we optimize Coupa, right? So what we've recognized, there's certain functionality within the platform, automation, virtual cards. There's things that we could adapt within the platform to strengthen our business case. And I think that it's not that we were necessarily just delayed because we couldn't get to these things. It was just the organization wasn't ready for these certain things. Now, if we were to introduce different elements of kind of automation into the platform, enabling things like the virtual card, those things, we're seeing this as kind of the next wave of, and I'll be honest, that's something where Aquis and Coupa have been amazing. So doing things like best practice assessments, which we're gearing up over the next 30 days to really review our total use case within Coupa. Are we optimizing the elements therein to standardize, what we're doing for our organization? And so I think those are really exciting things that are coming. I think, where we've been in the last year and a half has been basically going from limited systems, limited automation process to now we have something very meaningful, but we realize there's a lot more to tap into.
You mentioned there Aquis, talk to me a little bit about your kind of journey with Aquis, if you like, and kind of how you work together, and how has that been?
Yeah. As I kind of mentioned through that implementation phase, their guidance through that to help learn our organization was meaningful for us to learn our own organization. So there were many things that we just didn't know about ourselves. And so having them come in with their expertise and knowing the questions to ask, when to ask those questions, admittedly, through their guidance, we didn't always make the best decisions through the implementation phase. They still worked with us, bringing that through, and continue to work with us through this day. They're value partners. We just had an SAP implementation. Aquis was at the forefront, helping us make sure that integration with Coupa and those processes, that we were building those in the right way. Where there were problems, we were getting through those. So they've been a value partner from that up to and including now we're doing a lot of work in our AP process. We're doing, like I said, kind of a best practice assessment within Coupa. And so Aquis has been a value partner throughout. I just see so much benefit to having a partner there that understands the industry best practice, understands kind of, here's what you should be doing, right? But then has a deep enough understanding of what we are doing today and is helping us kind of bridge that gap. And, that's where I just see a lot of value. And they've been doing that since day one for us as they came on through the implementation. So it's really been a deep evolution of the relationship with them. I remember we had some senior leaders after go live, and we had a brief hypercare, and we had a senior leader that actually sent a note to Aquis saying like, hey, thanks for everything, and bet you're glad you're not having to work with us anymore. And I was scratching my head thinking, no, we're going to take this in a much different direction, and we have. I mean, they are entrenched within our processes, and we're happy about that. And as we've continued to launch additional initiatives and things to improve our organization and scale our organization, Aquis has been right there.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.